You're listening to Revolutionary Mystic, a subversive spirituality podcast where witches of color are disrupting, dismantling, and decolonizing mainstream spirituality with intersectional feminism, ancestral magic, and revolutionary thought, one unapologetic, real talk conversation at a time, featuring your host, international psychic medium, hoodoo root worker, and astrologer, Megan Alexandria.
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Revolutionary Mystic podcast. I'm your host, Megan Alexandria, and today I have the privilege and honor of chatting with the amazing, awesome Dr. Jennifer Mullan. You might know her from Instagram. That's where I found her, and if you don't know of her yet, you should look her up. You can find her at Decolonizing Therapy. Hello, Dr. Jennifer Mullan.
Hello, thank you for having me, Megan. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. How's it going?
Thank you for being here. I am so thrilled. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you, since I asked you. And I remember when I was creating my list of folks that I wanted to talk to, it was immediate. I was I would love to talk to you because your page provides so much for, I don't know, the word that's coming to mind is medicine. And I know that there are probably plenty of other folks that feel like me, and I want as many folks as possible to know that your medicine is out there, it's available, and that they should check it out. So
thank you. That really means a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Can you tell us about who you are, your identities, your pronouns, and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, my pronouns are she, her, and hers, but I'm also really happy with they, them, theirs. I identify, I'm a Black Latinx, I'm a Black Latina. My mother is from Panama, indigenous and African roots, as a Panamanian woman. And my dad is white. He's Irish and Italian. He grew up in the inner city. So all of that comes with me. I have a lot of ancestry, very, very rooted in the building of the Panama Canal. So a lot of my ancestors were taken, kidnapped from various parts of, West Africa and Northern Africa, actually, to help build the canal, and then either died doing that or settled there or moved forward into the United States. I'm also queer identified. I identify as fluid. And I know that I always say this and people kind of look at me and I'm like, and I really truly believe that I am we are a living, loving light. I'm very connected to my spirituality as well. I identify as a spiritualista, but a lot of my work also melds in various places and spaces. I grew up in the inner city of Jersey City, New Jersey. We kind of look over at New York City. We're really, really close. And I grew up also in the Brooklyn area. That's where my grandparents migrated to when they came to this country. And yeah, I lived in Jersey a great chunk of my life. I lived in New York City, New York, Queens, and then I moved to California, the Bay Area, for about 3-4 years for grad school, and then regrettably moved back because I really do miss the Bay Area, or the way that it used to be anyway.
Yeah.
It's hella gentrified now, but back then I really loved it.
True.
And yeah, I'm back here and I work right now at a university in New Jersey. I work at a university counseling center. That's kind of my day job, but really my labor of love and the melding together, the threading, the cording of various areas of my life has been in decolonizing therapy. The roots in decolonizing therapy come from a lot of my organizing background. I did a lot of, and I do, but not as much as probably I used to. I think now this stage is leading me into more back into my writing and the art and the creativity and bringing therapy into the work.
Mm-hmm.
But my activism and grassroots organizing has been long time coming.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for a really long time. So yeah, I think it is like this mix. I'm bringing my hands together right now between politicizing therapy, not just seeing, decolonizing as a metaphor, but also seeing it as like politicizing our understanding of trauma, politicizing our therapeutic relationship, politicizing and understanding oppression across the board, and connecting that with spiritual ways and ancestral intergenerational ways of knowing, and then also a deep sense of like community and collectivism. So that's a little baby bit about me.
I love it. And it makes so much sense to me now that I'm hearing it, but to know that you have, like you said, a deep connection to spirit, and that, you're working your own, essence of magic into your work as well. Makes total sense to me, because your work is in decolonizing. So of course you're, bringing your indigenous wisdom into your work. And that's just, I'm like smiling over here. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, right. Because like we're undoing and like unfucking all these different areas of our lives. And like I grew up hella like Catholic. My mama was like really, really Catholic. My grandma, they'd be like, you're going to CCD class and you're doing this and you have to do it. And I'd be like, why do I have to kneel and tell this man my sins? Like, why? No shade to anybody out there who's Catholic, I'm just a recovering Catholic. That's all,
Yeah.
But then meanwhile, my like abuelita, my mom and my tia, they would be like hustling up into like Brooklyn and like, oh, we're going to so-and-so's house. And I'd be like, why? Oh, well, we're going to read the soup. But like they would say it in Spanish, but it's like, in other words, like we would get this like reading from this soup that this woman would cook. But I'm like, wait a minute, is that what Jesus Christ would do? Is that what like?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So I teach hoodoo, and in the classes that I teach, one of the things that I do with all of my new students is I ask them to connect their ancestral lineage and the practices and the folk ways of their people. And a lot of folks are like, what do you mean? And what's really cool is through this exercise I give them, they find stuff like what you just said. And that's what I've actually never heard of before. Reading the soup is freaking awesome. It reminds me of, what is that? Like the Turkish coffee grounds.
Yeah.
And tea leaves and things like that. So that's really cool. What kind of soup was it?
I was so little. All I know is that it was like, I'm not even lying. It was a cauldron. Like it really was.
Yeah.
It was a massive cauldron. And I remember that I would be given something else separate. Like I would sit at a little table next to them, but I wasn't allowed to sit at the, the big people table.
Yep.
And she would like pour some of it in, and they each had to take a tiny sip, and then she would look, and then they would start talking, and it was just like, it was very interesting. And it was around money, men, stuff like that.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, all of it. But I just remember, and I asked my mom now, and she's like, really? You remember that? But she won't like answer direct questions.
Of course.
I'm like, Ma, that's so much shade. How are you going to be like, how are you going to lie?
Oh man, I can relate to that so much too. The Mexican part of my family, like, because they were they go to the Roman Catholic Church, so like not even just like regular. I think of it like that's like hardcore Catholic.
Wow.
And yet I grew up with a lot of like similar folk ways like you're speaking of, lots of quote unquote superstition, lots of what was it, like omens, like when the broom hits the ground or the knife drops off the table, like everything has a different meaning. And there's like an altar in my great grandmother's room, and I was just thinking, like, I'm like, nobody else Catholic I know has things like this. Like, this is interesting and weird, but she has the same response. And I wonder if that's just like a cultural, like, commonality where it's like, whenever I ask her like a direct question, like for as long as I can remember, she always like jokes about, will kind of like allude to her witchiness. But she won't out and out say, this is what I do and this is what I am.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's so real. And it reminds me of all the ways, and I know I'm like preaching to like the choir, but all the ways in which like we have to continue to like keep coming out and undoing and decolonizing and looking at our roots, because there's so much anti-blackness and anti-indigenousness, right? And like in so much of like the church connection and in the ways that we have to just like, no, keep it proper, keep it prim. You wear a dress or you put a mantle on your head or you do this or you do that, but no, that other stuff is dark, is raw, is quote unquote bad. And I feel like, thank goodness, like my mom has decided to grow with me, if that makes sense.
Good. Yeah.
So she's always saying, I'm learning from you so much. And it's a very humbling place to be. But there's times where I have to explain to her, no, Ma, like this is what shamanism means. It's not this, and this is not bad, and this is not good, and this just is. So I feel like when we can, if we have the privilege to do that, or if we still have our parents around, or if we want to continue to foster that connection, because sometimes we need to cut it off. I feel like it is important to try to like educate, people so they realize like, no, you were doing that too. Like you're like, they're just like a lot ingrained into you. You were like socialized to believe that was bad or scary.
Yeah. And like how healing to realize that not all of our magic was stolen from us, and that it was more or less just kind of hidden in plain sight the whole time,
Absolutely. I love how you said that. Yeah.
It's like I don't know about you, but when I think of decolonizing, I think a lot of things, but one of the things that I think of is that it's a remembering on a soul level, on a cellular level, on an intergenerational level,
Yes.
And so and also, like you said, what a privilege that you and I get to be, I guess, out of the broom closet, so to speak,
Yeah.
I hope, and I can imagine that our ancestors like rejoice in that, just, that even being a thing.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think this is a good podcast to talk about this, but like I grew up with very, how do I say this? So I'm going to say it. I grew up with, my mom and other people in my family telling me like, no, you don't say that. You can't say that out loud. It's okay if you know it, but write it in your journal, but don't say that out loud. And I would like know things, and I think some of that I remember wishing a lot of it away at a young age. Like putting my hands over my ears because I got in trouble so much around it, and closing my eyes and be like, I wish I wasn't like this. And I wish I didn't. I would walk into a room and be like, what happened? What did you do to her? What? Like, what are you talking about? How do you know that? Like, I was just like, it was on 100. It was on like turned all the way up. And I remember minimizing it. And then I would have what I thought were dreams that I believe I've come to see are now more like my past lives, some of the past lives. And they were very, very vivid. It would be the same dreams or the same images popping up, except I wasn't always sleeping. They would just keep popping up. And it was usually around being, literally, and I'm not just saying this, like I could have told you this 10 years ago before everybody was up on Instagram talking about this shit. Because like literally it was either about being like bound up and being in like a mental institution and being abused, or being burned at the stake, or you know, I would wake up like sweating, like ma, screaming, you know, and my father would be like, just like shut her up, like she's started screaming and crying, and it was like I just felt everything so deeply. And so I know a lot of people nowadays are like, oh, Instagram just makes everybody sound like an empath, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that there's some people, sure, there's folks out there that are not keeping it 100 or not the real deal, but also I think how beautiful that so many of us are able to be seen and heard in ways that we were not as children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that I'm hearing, you know, a therapist acknowledge all of these things. Just speaking as what I refer to as a psychic kid, you know, growing up, there's like this whole, I don't know, like avenue of trauma that kids like us experience that may or may not even get a chance to be addressed in therapy settings, you know, depending on your therapist and, you know, things of that nature. And it would be really cool for there to be more folks like you that know and perhaps have even like lived that experience of, you know, I was experiencing all of these things that to the colonial world, quote unquote, don't exist or aren't real, or if it is real, it's evil or bad. And so therefore I was too. And, you know, because I experienced a lot of the same, like wanting to shut it out. I actually was just really terrified of it all when I was little. And so, you know, having to go back, and I think it was like I was like my early 20s, where I decided, you know, I was like, well, there must be something to this. And so just kind of like healing all of that stuff and being like, all right, well, I'm going to stop running from this quote unquote gift or whatever it is that I have. And maybe it's there for a reason, and like digging deeper and just in doing all of that and meeting other people, I'm realizing a lot of us have, you know, traumatic experiences growing up gifted. And in a colonial setting is pretty rough.
Yeah, I think that's so real. And you know, as you're talking, like all these little light bulbs are going off, and I was just sort of like, yeah, you know, right? Again, like being around and talking to people that can identify, there's something so healing with that, you know?
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, to keep it 100, I mean, I only started really talking about it, and it was very tentatively, and it was talking in the past tense, or look, my throat, like I'm coughing it up because like my throat is like, are you sure you want to say this? Sure you want to say this? My throat chakra. Hold on, I'm going to take a sip of tea.
Yeah, absolutely. The same thing happens to me. That's so funny.
Like, oh, so only with my therapist, who I've, you know, been seeing for the last 10 years. And I didn't know at the time that I picked someone that was so fucking spiritual. She ended up being like a spiritual mom or older sister to me, and still is. And our relationship, we're just constantly weaving it and growing it. And she's so brilliant. So shout out to Dr. Chacon. But she, you know, I remember she asked me a question, and I was talking about the past, and I was like, well, I had a dream, and and she was like, oh, okay, but you're talking about it as though it's not a dream. And I was like, because right, in psychology, I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, right? Like I was told very, very clearly that, you know, when people start talking about things that are not there and they see A, B, C, and D, well, that's a hallucination, or that's a delusion, or this is auditory hallucination. And so I knew that I had to tread carefully. There was no way I was going to go up in there like, oh, blah, 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 because I didn't know how she would respond. But for many years, I was bullied and like tortured by a really dark little child spirit. You know, growing up as a kid, and I hated sleeping. I know a lot of people are like, I love taking naps. Well,
not me either. I'm with you.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I like my husband, my roommate, they would both tell you, like, I am not a napper, and I totally do the classic psychic medium sleeping thing where I like cover my head. And the having limbs outside of the blanket's not really an option. If it's dangling over the edge of the bed, there are absolutely monsters that can grab you. And I'm not joking, like I'm being kind of silly, but like for real, sleeping, and I'm aware that it stems from this very specific childhood trauma, you know, but it's an interesting space to walk, knowing that, like, yes, the monsters more or less are kind of real. And those are like things that are valid to be afraid of. Yeah. And, you know, whatever coping strategies or protection mechanisms you have are completely valid too. But yeah, like same. I'm not real big on naps, and sleeping is kind of like a sensitive space for me.
Yeah. Thank you for being real about that, because I think that a lot of us kind of like don't talk about it, you know, that, you know, like why sleep can feel so scary. And then I also think about, you know, ancestrally, a lot of times when I'm doing some of the rage inner child work with folks, what I notice is that people that are very, very busy and frequently move to the rage stance of like distraction a lot and devotion and devoting themselves to a cause. They're just like busy. And it's a way to avoid slowing down.
Yep.
It's a way to avoid like the feeling and maybe some of the traumatic stuff that comes up with it. As well as I'm thinking of all the ways in which so many of our peoples were forced to constantly be on the move, or right, toil in fields or take care of other people's children. And I just feel in so many ways that capitalism still produces that fatigue. You know, I'm always talking about capitalism fatigue, because I just feel like half of the time, most of us cannot have a difficult time stepping into what it is we love doing, because we're worried about paying bills, and that's real.
Yeah, it's hella real.
Yeah.
It's hella real. And you're absolutely right. I wonder if you feel this way too, but because I'm one of those busybodies, and I am like, I work, like I wake from the second I wake up, like I'm one of those people, this is a bad habit, don't do it. But like I wake up, I pick up my phone, and I'm working in bed before I even get out of bed. And then like all the way until it's time to go to bed, I'm laying in bed working before I tuck the phone under my pillow, which is also not a good habit, for multiple reasons, because of, you know, you and I, before we were recording, we're talking about how we both have a Capricorn moon. And, you know, shout out to my other Capricorn moons, or folks that have, you know, Capricorn placements that are, you know, prominent in their charts. You know, we like to burn the candle at both ends, and it's absolutely something inherited. When you were speaking just now, I was seeing for the first time, like visually, I was seeing how I am always doing, much in the same way like my grandmother is always doing, and like my great grandmother. And when I'm in the presence of my great grandmother, I'm like, I just want her to sit down, you know?
Right.
I'm like, oh, let me do that. Like, you just rest. You just, you know, like, let's just sit and talk, you know, that type of thing. And it definitely comes from that place, like you're talking about, where, you know, rest was, you know, something that was kind of taken from us, I suppose, you know,
Yes.
Even all the way back to like slavery, like our time wasn't our own. And then quote unquote, when we were freed, we'll use that term loosely.
Yes.
We entered capitalism as free people. And to me, that's not free at all, but it's just a different kind of slavery. And so I know what you mean when you say like, it's rest or get the bills paid, or, you know, so I feel you.
And that's so real. I feel the same way about my mother. She's always like going. I hear, like, when I have, let's say, friends over, people I care about, and let's say I'm serving them some nourishment, some food, they're like, please, we're waiting for you to sit down. And I'm like, oh, well, and I remember saying that to my mother, and all of us being like, Ma, sit down, like, just sit down. Oh, you eat it. And I'm really trying to shift that narrative.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to shift that narrative. And wow, and I think this is what, like, the conundrum is, and the paradox is, like, while always holding the collective, I'm always thinking about also, how is my personal healing connected to the collective healing?
Right.
You know, and that's a big question for me. And I'm always thinking about, like, how can I take care of myself and place my needs first? And is that in paradox to, you know, also making sure the community's well? And I don't think it is. I think it's like, we truly do need to ensure that we are, you know, resting a little more, hydrating a little more. We were talking about water before, right?
Yeah.
Because what comes up for me is this image of an emaciated cow.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember having a wonderful healing once, and a woman asked me to pick a card, and I remember sitting there thinking I was so tired I was going to fall asleep on her table, and it was the emaciated cow, and I haven't been able to get it from my mind. You know, of this, like, the nurturing, giving, milk, life-giving cow, right? But, you know, like, if the cow doesn't rest, if it doesn't get adequate care, if it doesn't recuperate, if it doesn't eat, if it doesn't play, if it doesn't have green pastures, then the fuck, like, it's going to die. So that she said to me, do you know what happens when cows can't provide milk anymore? And I'm like, they die? And she's like, no, they start, I don't know if milking is the right word, but they start providing blood. They start bleeding.
Whoa.
Right?
That's heavy. Yeah.
Right? And I had to sit there with it and just, like, wow, like, we're bleeding out. And I deeply identified with that, with the community in which I was working, my community, my students, my colleagues, people, even online. Like, I really realized that when we have a deep history of violation, you know, when we have a very deep history of being, like, euthanized and violated and colonized and conditioned and, you know, made to conform, what ends up happening is we take it on and we think something's wrong with us if we can't keep the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And there's a lot of, like, it almost feels like, I wonder, I'll try and articulate this, but that in keeping ourselves busy, like, we are kind of, like, performing this capitalist ideal, and that perhaps at some point down the line, it was like, oh, okay, well, like, under capitalism, like, that's good. That's, you know, looked good upon. And what we didn't realize is that it's, like, you know, self-sacrificial, though it could, you know, gain us proximity to whiteness for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And it, you know, could gain you various privileges potentially. But at what cost? You know, I know, like, so many folks, many of them that I'm related to, that have sacrificed so much. Like, one of the, it's, like, almost even just kind of, like, just unreal, this example. So my great grandmother, she's still alive. She's going to be 92 this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love her. She's a strong witchy woman. She's actually who I was talking about in terms of being Catholic, but also always alluding to the fact that she's a witch.
Yes, Grandma. Yes.
Yeah, and she will not hesitate to threaten somebody with witchcraft too. I love her for that.
That's awesome.
She's amazing. But she worked like until she was like 80 something, and I kid you not, she worked for the Social Security building as a maid.
Wow.
So right, I'm like, that's the literal, so Social Security, like, that's where you're supposed to get like your money from once you reach a certain age. That way you can like relax and take care of yourself and, you know, be an elder. But she didn't do that. She was there like scrubbing toilets and, you know, vacuuming and all that stuff in the damn building itself because, you know, it was so deeply programmed into her that there was this, I guess, self-pride to be had and always keeping busy and always making money and always providing for others, you know. She's the same way. Like everybody would be seated at the kitchen table and then she would be the last one up heating her own tortillas, you know. So yeah, it's interesting that we inherit all of that. I wonder if we think about you and I being ancestors, living ancestors today, and our work as ancestors, I wonder if the balance or even just the progress might lie in, like, yes, providing for our community, but not in a way that's like so self-sacrificial.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And I wonder if maybe I reframe it because I don't know about you, but when I'm up like cooking everybody's food and everybody else is halfway through with their dinner, like when I'm up washing the dishes, like whatever it is, I see images of those matriarchs in my family that I love so much.
Yes.
And in a loving sense, I'm kind of, you know, idolifying them and maybe even emulating them. So it's meant, like, with it, the intent is through an act of love, like, oh, I'm carrying on in the way that they were. However,
right.
I'm like, maybe the more loving response would be to do that, but not in the same way, in a different way, in a new way.
Yes. Yes. I agree completely. And I would dare say that that's what we are doing. I think that we're trying to figure it out, you know, like so many of us, that we're out here knowing that a new age, we're like the old is dying, these old grids, these old timelines, these old ways of doing things. We can still honor them and hold them close and dear and honor the medicine and the stories and the struggle. But I have been feeling lately like I don't want to place the struggle all the time and this like working myself to the bone. I don't want to put it on a pedestal anymore, you know, because it's just, I have had to go out on medical leave in my job. I have had to go, like I've sat there, like it's real, you know, like I've sat there sometimes in front of people like, I am sorry, like I can't, I don't think I'm really at a place to function today. Like, you know, and then we've had to process it the week after, and they come back and they're like, Dr. Jen, you're real as fuck. I appreciate you. I'm like, no, but really, I really couldn't be here. Like, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I was going to lose it. Like, I couldn't listen to another person talking about how they couldn't live and how they couldn't thrive and how they didn't have, you know, healthcare for their mother and she was dying. It just, some days we just can't, you know, we can't. And I feel like it's important that we honor that we honor all aspects of that. And to be honest with you, I'm also, like, a lot of my work is around collective care as a revolutionary act. And I present on it and I talk about it a lot, and people think like, oh yeah, self-care, and it's like bubble baths and getting your nails done. And I'm like, no, like not necessarily, no. And a lot of us don't, you know, have money for all that. And some of us, that can be triggering. I know people that don't like getting their feet touched, and I know people that don't like getting massages. And I mean, I like them, but for the record, I do. But a lot of people don't, and I think it's important that we really connect some of the ways in which we have been colonized. And I think it's important that we look at some of the ways that we have told ourselves that this is what rest is, you know, and you know, rest is resistance. Right? And so, like, how do we cure this, like, traumatized bodies that we live with? Our etheric bodies, our astral bodies, our energetic bodies, our physical bodies. Like, how do we, like, make them better, make them well, so it could return to love and like fight and uprise and do it differently together.
Right.
So that is something that I sit with a great deal. And I also sit with really thinking about like, oh, wow, how many times have I blamed myself? How many times have I felt like I'm the one that's quote unquote crazy and realize like it is this like emotional colonization that is being perpetrated on me.
Yep.
Right. Like this gaslighting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It heals, at least from personal experience for me, like it heals like so much of your story when you're able to see, anything really through an Indigenous lens. And I think that, where we can like really heal ourselves is through that Indigenous love lens and not through the colonizer judgment lens.
Yes.
Because, I carried, goodness, have you ever seen that movie, Girl Interrupted?
Yes.
Okay. So I loved that narrative growing up because I was a lot like Angelina Jolie and Susanna Keys. Like I was a lot like those two girls combined. And, I spent a lot of time in, I don't know if I would call them therapeutic spaces, but, I definitely was hospitalized and medicated at a fairly young age.
I'm sorry.
Like that.
I'm sorry. Truly, on behalf of our profession, like that's fucked up. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was pretty fucked up. And so when you grow up that way, you internalize a narrative that there's like something bad or broken or wrong with you. And, it's taken so much years of undoing, and I'm still undoing it. Like, I'm not kidding. So like, I'm really interested in the paranormal right now, and one of the things that I really want to like do for fun is do a little bit of paranormal investigation through an Indigenous lens.
I'm nodding vigorously with my hand on my chest, like, yeah, okay.
Because I love all those shows, but it's done through in a very colonistic way. And one of the things that I'm undoing currently that totally stems from that colonial therapy trauma that I had was that there are these spirit entities that exist and that people experience them, and it doesn't say anything about their psyche really, like and it doesn't make them bad or broken, and that our people have embraced that knowledge and that wisdom for ages. And so of course it came natural to us when we were kids, like we weren't trying to be bad or whatever it was, and that we just essentially were just in tune with something that we inherited, and then the world around us said, oh well, there's definitely something wrong with you, and so I think one of the cool things about getting to speak with people like you and a lot of the other folks I work with is like we're at a place in our collective evolution now where more and more folks are like, yeah, like I have psychic abilities, and yes, I am an empath. And I know a lot of folks are like annoyed at the internet because the internet can be annoying. But I strongly encourage people to try and understand what it is, where it is coming from inside of them that is so quick to be like, well, why are all these people empaths all of a sudden? And, what makes them an empath and things like that. And it's like, well, wonder if that's just part of our evolution as a species, and wonder if that's part of our growth and our evolution, and wonder if we're also just now like having a language for it.
Yes. Yes. I can really identify with that. And I think that that's I think that's amazing. I would love to be on that show.
Yes.
I want to make a guest appearance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's like a road. There's a few roads and places in Jersey where I have dared venture, and apparently they're like super haunted.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. That's another podcast. But yeah, I think that that's real, and I think that there's something to be said with, why, yeah, exactly what you said. Like, I'm co-signing on it. I cannot tell you how many people, and I started realizing that there must have been something about me, even if we were just talking about like, what was going on for them and their current relationship, and then somehow it went back to childhood and feeling those ways, and they would say, can I tell you something? Like, yeah, this is your space. Tell me whatever you want to tell me. Like, I remember being a kid, and my dad was always hitting my mom, and I would frequently see this thing by the cabinet, and it would like walk, and I can't tell you how many times I wasn't ready, I was like, whoa, like, wait, they're not going to just tell me some other heavy traumatic experience. I mean, it is traumatic, but it's like, they're going to tell me how they were scared out of their mind, or how this being, entity, spirit, fairy, whatever, became a friend during a really, really intense time. And I cannot tell you how many people have like looked at me and said like, please don't like lock me up. And like, and I'm just like, no, you're not alone. I've experienced things too. And this is what I mean. Like, I think that this is important. This is part of the undoing and unpacking. This is part of letting people know that we can take back every single fucking aspect of our ways of knowing. We can take back connecting and communing with spirits. We can take back connecting and communing with the land, with the earth, with other ways of doing it that whiteness and caucasity has told us is sick, is dark, is that's gross, or what is that about? That's weird. And even if we're not completely out about it, I think it is a step in the right direction, that there's pockets of places that we can have these conversations.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that we get to share with folks, like if you're listening right now and you think you might, most people say, I think I might maybe have a little bit of psychic something. I don't know. I like kind of have these dreams a little bit. If you're having those thoughts, it is like I'm 99% sure you do have some ability there. And that's not surprising. And if at some point in your life it has made you feel just like, I don't like the word crazy, but if it has made you question, your mental health, or the validity of your experiences, all of those things, like, know that you're not alone in that. I did that my entire life and still sometimes have to unpack that and check myself with some indigenous love, like no, girl, like, this is what our people saw. Yeah. So you're not the only one. And know that, that narrative isn't necessarily ours, and we don't have to hold it, and we can let it go, because that's the colonizer's narrative.
Yeah, it is. And in the way that it damages us and starts to like pick away and erode at our spirit and our well-being is really disgusting.
Yep.
And it creates loneliness and separation. It creates a sense that we are inadequate and not worthy. And it also makes us feel as though, everything that we believe, all that negative stuff, that it's true. And it's not. It's not.
It keeps us small too.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like it's like almost every time somebody wants to share with me that they have some type of psychic phenomena that they experience, they make themselves so small, and it like hurts my spirit every time. I'm like, no, like, be big with it. Like, it's okay to say, I have prophetic dreams.
Yeah.
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 And instead of, kneecapping what you're telling me. Oh, I think I might maybe just a little bit, like, no, you can own it. And think about like, and in owning it is a revolutionary act too, because if the function of capitalism has us downplaying or vilifying these abilities and these experiences, why would it do that? Well, to keep us out of our power. And it's clearly working very effectively if all of us have spent some time or another beating around the bush around our abilities, around our magic, around our gifts. And so if you want to do something to completely disrupt that and make your ancestors and yourself real happy, then delve deep into your magic and your intuition.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is so crucial that we surround ourselves with people that get it.
Yeah.
Like communities that get it. I know that I am happily divorced, right? And like, my ex-partner like just couldn't get it, and it would freak him out. And I would say things and I would frequently get like berated for it. Like, every time you say something, it always comes true. Just don't say anything. Just don't. And it was just like, wait, so, okay, you want me to minimize a part of who I am because you don't want to honor my other way of knowing. Right. Yeah. So that sucks.
Yeah.
And not only does it suck, but sometimes it feels lonely. So like, that's one of my things is I'm like connecting with people and I'm in the world of meeting new folks and deciding who I want to let in my life in more intimate ways. One of my main things are like, will they accept me in all of my bigness? Like, will they accept me in my intensity? Will they accept, and it's not even a question. Now, will they accept it, but will they relish in it? Will they love it? Will they because I'm not going to quiet the fuck down for anyone anymore. It's just not happening.
Yes.
Yeah. Too long. No more.
No, I love that. I too am happily divorced. And I'm actually remarried now.
Okay.
And so in my first marriage, a lot of the same happened. This person was okay with my witchcraft-ish, but was always like, suspicious of me and my ways and like, kind of negative about it in that sense too. And then, of course, with my intuition, anytime, because that person had a lot of stuff to hide. And anytime I shared my intuition, it would become an issue. And
Same here. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so there was a lot of, a lot of hurt from that. And so same thing, like when I was, through enough of my healing years after that divorce, to, even pursue intimate connections with people and what that might look like, I started putting my like psychic self and my witch self like on Front Street, like, because I was like, let me just weed them out right now. Like, this is what I do for a living. This is who I am. Like, if you can't handle these things, like, let's just not waste each other's time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm loving this conversation. Can I just say?
Me too. I'm loving this too, and I can just feel that everyone listening at home will be feeling it too.
I'm glad. Yeah. And it's also, I think it's so important for me too, to put on Front Street as well, the way that spirituality doesn't capture it for me. Like, cause I feel like spirituality is like an umbrella term for me in the way that I walk in the world. But I want to say, like, I've studied, not just studied it, but like I've lived it. I've gone through those dark nights of the soul, like, right? Like, I feel like there's also a process of really like meeting shadow self, connecting with the heavier, darker aspects of self, going through. And that's why I feel like, quote unquote, umbrella term spirituality, whatever it is for people, with the quote unquote therapy or healing work go hand in hand.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when we go, right, those journeys into understanding ourselves better, the shedding, the constant death and the loss of who you thought you would be and who would be in your life. And I feel like that really is important, and taking care of like your inner child. And I know these are words that people hear nowadays and they're like, oh yeah, inner child or this work and that work. But I think there's also roots to colonization in there, like
Oh, yeah.
look at what we're dealing with now. Like it's very on purpose to separate parent from child.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like it is such a colonial ass divide and conquer fucking technique.
Mm-hmm.
It has been done from the very beginning, and it continues to be done. And when I think about that and how we often have parents that are not quote unquote available,
Mm-hmm.
it is more crucial than ever to make sure that we're mending and healing some of our like traumatized inner and outer selves. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely. It
yeah.
completely makes sense to me. Yeah. I'm just like nodding my head vigorously right now.
Yeah, sometimes I go off on tangents. Hence, this is why when I write, I'm just like, okay, good thing that Instagram has like a word count limit. Because I would just keep going and going and going.
Same. I just think that, having a healthy, like as much as we can, we can't always, I'll be honest, like right there, like there's not always healthy relationships like within like, my parents, that I can cultivate or, work on. But as much as we can is important, because that is revolutionary, because it's counter to what they're doing is, that whole divide and conquer, like you were just saying, so if you can do that, like that's amazing. And that's one of the things that I don't know if I've ever actually even said it out loud, that brought me to wanting to really work on my relationship with my mother. Because when I was doing my work, because even though I'm a Black Indigenous woman of color, we all live under white supremacy, and none of us are like, without it somewhere in the fabric of our being. In fact, it's a lot of places. And so, as much as I hold up the mirror for other folks, I'm also spending a lot of time in the mirror myself. And like in doing that, and part of my work in looking at anti-blackness and et cetera and so forth, I started to see my story with my mom and, the things that we went through growing up, from like this understanding about anti-blackness and all of the things my mother was up against. And like it completely shifted, because I had to ask myself, I was like, oh my goodness, is like part of my relationship with my mother, anti-Black in some way? And the answer was yes.
That's so real.
And that was like a really, really hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But as soon as I figured it out, I was like, fuck that. Let me call my mom, and I hadn't spoken to my mom in years. And so she and I have been in connection ever since. And when I speak to her now, maintaining my relationship with her now as best as I can, it feels revolutionary, like you're saying, because it's counter to what they're trying to do to us, is what I was, trying to get at.
No, that's beautiful. That's perfect. And it's important. So real. That is so real. And what I think is also real is that, sometimes we have to like look at that oppressor within ourselves. Like we have to see where that is. And we have to look at how we continue to perpetuate. So that's real important. And I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. And it can kind of contribute to a sense of just anxiety, right? Overwhelm, just
Exhaustion.
Exhaustion. It's like we're always trying to like keep up and figure it all out, and it's fucking exhausting.
Yeah. It's like one of the important questions that I always ask myself when I'm, doing some introspection is I'm like, okay, well, where's that voice coming from? Like, what voice is that? Is that the voice of the colonizer? A lot of times it is.
Yeah.
Whatever my judgment is or whatever. Usually for me, it's around not letting myself rest. Like, what was it, like a month or so ago, I started having these like, they felt like mini seizures. We're not entirely sure because we haven't like caught it on medical imaging stuff, but I may have been working myself so damn hard that I was having these like mini seizure episodes, and I made myself teach a live class while having seizures because my inner colonizer, like I couldn't reckon with like, I need to lay that the fuck down. Like, this is not like that's, that's a little bit like self-abusive,
It is. It so is. Yeah. And that's real. And the ways that we feel like, no, we have to keep on, because also that we don't want to look like, quote unquote, a hot mess. Right? We don't want to look like we don't have it together. Right?
Right.
And that is so consistent. That is so problematic. And that also comes from the way that it's been drilled into us, right? That we are not organized, or if we cancel on something or we move something around, that there's something wrong with us.
Right. We have to like sterilize
yes
our energy before sharing it with others. And that's so harmful.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's something I could definitely work on undoing, and I'm sure other folks could as well.
I know. I'm like taking a deep breath, like, yeah.
We're moving lots of energy.
And it's important. It is so real and so important. And I'm so grateful to be having, truly, and I think this is what I started to say before and I got thrown off. But I'm really, really, really so grateful for being able to have a predominantly like spiritual, psychic conversation,
Yeah.
I'm really, really grateful. Because I think a lot of what I talk about is like, like the resistance, viva la resistance, like, and it's not on purpose, because it's just like, that's sometimes what needs to come out. But to be real, a lot of that is also channeled for me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A lot of that is also psychic though.
Yeah, it is. And, my therapist was just saying that before. She's just like, and I'm so like, I know, I love her. And I'm like, wait, you follow me? And she's like, yeah, whether you read things in here or sometimes I'll read some of your things. She was like, it's channeled, Jennifer. And I'm like, oh, like,
it is.
It is like, well, I thought channeling looked like this, right? Also colonized view, right? Like, I thought channeling only looked like blank. I thought channeling was blank. But truthfully is that like the mental health system has like minimized and like watered down some of my like abilities, and I know that I'm not the only one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, there are folks out there that are therapists, but they're amazing Reiki healers. My work doesn't happen to be with my hands. It does not happen to be Reiki, but I'm just saying, some people are out there and they do A, B, C, and D. Some people, and I feel that the mental health system and the way that we've been trained in school has taught us to stand down on every angle, to just behave, to fucking fall in line, to not, bring yourself into it in any way, shape, or form, to not be too much, to not offer any suggestions. And I'm just like, who does that work for? Like some people, but not all the time, not many. Like who does that really work for? And it's sort of a sad feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm like, it works for nobody, but I know who it serves.
It serves whiteness. Yeah.
It sure does.
Yes.
Man, that made me think of how a lot of the folks that I get to speak with in readings and over the internet and all kinds of things, classes, whatnot, are working on reclaiming their intuition. And, one thing that I'm really seeing right now as you and I are talking is that, it's there. It's just one of those places that colonialism has put a lot of wounds on for us. And that might be part of your healing work of your intuition is going back through your psychic story, beginning all the way back like to your origins as a healer, because we all carry that archetype, because that's how kids are just born open. People say that to me a lot. They're like, oh, when I was little, I had all these abilities, and then now not so much, and I don't know if I could still bring it out or what happened. And I always tell them the same thing, like life happened, capitalism happened, like white supremacy happened.
Absolutely.
It's there. It's just there under a bunch of abusive rubble and rhetoric, and it's all about unlearning, deprogramming, and being open to channel again, like you were saying.
Yes. And to bring, and I'm like nodding while you're talking. I'm like, yes, and to like call each other in.
Yeah.
To bring each other in, and to have compassion. So like I want to say, like, as much as it sounds like I'm screaming and banging books on my page, I am, because I think that rage is medicine. I think it is healthy. I think it is healing. I think it provides a fire and a wind and an important aspect to our stories and our truth and our ancestral stories. Like there is a lot of intergenerational trauma and lots of reasons that there's ever present fucking anger there. And there are aspects of me when needed, and not just me, but like movements that need to soften sometimes, and there's times when I just feel deep sadness and compassion. And there's times when I feel like, I'm going within. I need to go in my shell. Goodbye, world.
You're a Cancer, right? Cancer sign?
Yes, I am. That's right. I totally forgot. There's times where it's just like, goodbye, too much. And everyone always sees me as an extrovert. I think it's fascinating. I just did an event on Monday in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and a few of the sisters that stayed around afterwards are like, wait, you're a Cancer? Cancers usually don't communicate the way you do. How are you a Cancer? And I was cracking up. I'm like, well, my Mercury, Leo's Mercury. And they're like, oh. I communicate like a Leo, I guess. But I also, like, I don't think I'm just an extrovert. I think it's that I'm often sometimes really uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with small talk. I'm uncomfortable when shit is really surface, I'm uncomfortable and I get awkward and I'm like, oh, I don't, and not that it's not about the people. It's not about someone personally. I can seem kind of maybe like boring even, like just like flat, but when it starts moving around feelings and spirituality and a sense of beingness and knowing and dream work and astrology and I've been like that, and love and feelings and being real with each other, even if it's difficult real, that's when I find myself light up and get back online.
Same.
Yeah,
that's the stuff that like makes me feel like I've come alive. And it makes me feel like when I'm sitting with somebody who can speak on those things with me, like I'm really getting to see like their spirit on a, in a deep way. And in my brain, that's in a significant way, but that's because I am an 8th house dominant person, and it's making me wonder, I'm like, I need to chart. I wonder what 8th house placements you have, or if there's any Plutonian themes in your chart, because folks with those placements and aspects and whatnot are like us, and we like to hang out in the deep end. But it also speaks to our calling, It's just our nature, because that's what we need in order to do what we do. And it's also like representative of our ancestors too. Like, who were our ancestors? Our ancestors were healers, waymakers, chain breakers. Like, they were doing some real stuff.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And I think the reality is, even though some people are just like, this is just all too much, and people are just getting a little ridiculous with it. And again, as we both, I think, are agreeing, it's like, no, like, we're coming out. We're like, we're coming to, we're stepping into, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. Even my, I like I said, I work at a university counseling center, which is much more like community mental health. And a lot of the people will come in. I even had a young woman come in the other day, and she's like, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but what's your sign?
I was dying to ask my therapist.
I loved it. And I looked at her. This was like our first session. She was like, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like a little stumped, because like, I know how I'm supposed to respond, but I know how I want to respond. And I was looking at her, and I was like, tell me about that. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, so basically, if I'm a such and such, you're gonna like leave and turn around? She goes, I might. I said, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm a Cancer sun. And she's like, oh, okay. She's like, okay, I like you. Okay. And she is very Sagittarius dominant. And she was like, I normally can't do water signs, but I can do Cancers. And I'm like, okay, we talked, and we have a great relationship now, but it's pretty funny. The awareness and people stepping into their selves, their authentic selves. And I do think that this is a form of fucking resistance. I do think it's a form of being able to say, I am serving my people. I am doing it my way. And I'm also allowing different aspects of myself to come forth. I'm more in alignment with who I am. Yeah. That's my thought. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, I remember when I started doing this professionally, I was a little bit timid about telling the people in my family, this is what I'm doing, for fear of it being viewed as illegitimate, especially like the Black side of my family. They're all from Louisiana, and very scholarly family. Like, everybody's got degrees and accolades and letters behind their name or in front of their name. Like, my mom has her PsyD too. Go mom.
Wow. Yeah.
But so in my deliberate choice to not go and do all of those things, and to go from, because they loved it when I was a caseworker, that was something they could hang with. But then when I switched and did a total 180 and was like, you know what, I'm actually going to be a root worker. And they were like, huh? And I was like hoodoo, and they're like, what do you mean hoodoo? Like voodoo? And I'm like, no. Voodoo's a religion. But, like hoodoo, like the work of our ancestors. And then it was like, all of a sudden they couldn't say anything against it. It's so all of our ways, are legitimate. And when I see, folks like you, folks like my mom, my beloved friend Shaida, who is also on this show, who's she's about to go into practicum and all this other stuff as a Black therapist also. When I see you all as healers, just using a different set of tools than I use. And I think that it's just as important, we need all of it. We need as many versions and as many varieties, and as much as we can. We need as much of us as we possibly can.
Yes, we do.
Out there doing the healing work for our community as possible. I love when you were talking about your client asking you what your sign was. I was like, it's reminding me of this conversation I had with Shaida when we were talking on the podcast in a previous episode about how important it is to interview your therapist, and that you could and should have a choice, and that didn't occur to either of us until we were of a certain age.
Yeah.
But now that we know, we tell that to as many Black and brown folks especially, but people in general as possible. Like, you get to choose, and that's, you know, something you definitely want to practice. But I was envisioning that it would be wonderful if there comes a day where in the therapist's, like, their profile or whatever on the website, or sometimes you'll see like a pamphlet in the waiting room with all the different therapists that says like a blurb about them. It would be amazing if we could reach a point where there are, you know, Black and Indigenous centered healing spaces, and it says, you know, Dr. Jennifer Mullan is a Cancer sun, and, you know, such and such rising, and things like that, for those of us that want to take that into consideration, you know.
I love it.
You know, and wouldn't it be great if it was also okay for you to, in your blurb, like, yeah, of course, like, include the stuff about your education and you know, your achievements through those kinds of avenues, and also that a little bit about your spiritual practice too.
Yeah, that's I love it. Yeah.
And like,
I love that. Yeah.
If I was able to like
down, I would have got it down.
like if that was available, like, holy, like, I would immediately be like, that's my person, you know. And it would let me know that, like, right away, like, that's a safe space for somebody like us, you know?
Yeah, thank you for that. No, I think that's a great idea. And I think that that's important. And I'm also thinking to myself, you know, I can be honest and say, I can feel my body go, oh my gosh, what is people going to, you know, like, it's always like that continual, like, coming out. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And, continuing to like unpack who I am and to who and where, but you're absolutely right. So this tells me that there's a place that I need to go. I need to go down that road, you know?
Yeah, hell yeah. Oh, I just think that, you know, that's a beautiful, I believe in Afrofuturism as like a tool for revolutionary thought. And so that daydream was my little bit of like Afrofuturism. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if I walked into a healing center that was full of these magical therapists?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is that, well, I'm just going to put it this way. It's being talked about. I'll say that. It's being talked about, and you know, a friend reached out, and you know, it's like we have to be honest that not everybody is like us, right? And not everybody will be able to have an us. But sometimes I meet people, and they're like, "Yeah, right now, can you be my therapist?" I'm like, "No, like, I probably need to think on this, but we can maybe work that out. I don't know." But I think that it's important to have a group. And sometimes when people ask me like, oh, can you recommend someone? I don't always have an idea. You know, like sometimes it's like I need to like know people. It's not just enough to like know them on Instagram, but like I need to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be able to like know people before you're referring out. But I am talking to a few good friends that are therapists, and they're like, yo, we need a healing center, like decolonizing therapy could be there. And a friend of, you know, my friend does a lot of work with some of the Egyptian goddesses.
Oh, cool.
Another friend who does a lot of shaman journey work, and is getting like an apprenticeship. So we were talking about like what that would look like in the center and where would it be. And I'm like, maybe we need a mobile center.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, come here, and go everywhere. You know, I'm sure everybody listening at home is like, I wish that was here where I am.
Yeah, exactly. But that's just kind of how I feel. But I feel like part of the decolonizing, quote unquote, therapy, part of the, like removing it from just a metaphor, is that people understand that it is crucial for them to start looking at some of the things that creates this permanent state of like unhappipiness and like being off their axis. You know, like it happens sometimes for any of us, like you and I were talking about before, like, you know, I've had a dark month this past month. Like,
Yeah.
it's dark. Like, you know, my birthday didn't, normally I could be like, oh, it's my birthday and I feel great and blah, 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 blah. But I didn't feel like that.
Yeah.
You know, I felt dark, very, very, very dark. And I had to be honest about what was being activated in me, you know, and I had to be honest about what it is I needed. And I had to look at what I didn't want to let go of in that moment.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
it makes perfect sense.
yeah.
It's been a month. I think that, you know, I imagine probably every Black and brown person listening, and even some of our allies can recognize that the nature of the climate we're existing in is inherently continuously traumatic.
Yes.
And just even like carrying that in our DNA from the moment we were born, and then having lived the lives we've lived because of who we are, and then doing the work that we do, and then plus just trying to exist in all of this also.
Yes.
It's a lot. And sometimes it crushes me, you know? And sometimes it gets real dark too. Like it's tough. And what's weird is in the social media, you know, the aspect of the work in that sense, you know, it's all, the culture is about posting every day, and the inherently racist algorithm is set up to where if you don't do that, like, you're going to totally screw up whatever momentum as far as your exposure goes if you know, don't post for however long of a period of time. And so what that leaves no room for, ironically, is, like, our human experience. And so, you know, you had a dark month. I've been having a pretty dark week. And even though in our work is connected to the things that we're likely feeling dark about, because I imagine some of yours are some of mine. Even though it's connected to my work, it's still sometimes it just crushes me, like levels me, and I'm just like, I can't today. You know, there was a day where I wanted to, or I thought, you know, I should. It's a celebration to say that the podcast made it onto iTunes. Like, that's really like worthy of celebrating. And I didn't have it in me. I was literally on the couch crying for much of that day. That was the day that Toni Morrison died, which I ended up being, you know, happy and came to peace with eventually. But initially it was like, I even have room for my joy right now. You know?
That is so real. Absolutely. And you're right. Like, you know, Instagram is inherently racist. You know, they're going to kick my ass off for that.
We're going to be shadow banned forever now.
Yes. You know, but it is. And all of these systems are all made to benefit certain individuals. And you know what? I trust that everybody that needs to see my work is seeing it. Everybody that needs to see your work and follow your page is following it, or will when they're ready to. And I thank goodness, like my one of my peer educators, my student, she was majoring in social media, which is like a thing now, which is awesome. She was minoring in it rather with her media degree, and she like asked to help, and she's like really one of the first people that ever believed in decolonizing therapy. So shout out to Shanae Cook. And little by little, you know, we called it intern, but I wasn't comfortable with the whole like not paying her part, even though food was involved, like an exchange of nourishment. But now, you know, she has moved up to like that social media assistant and really doing the work and working on herself and taking care of herself. I'm so proud of her. And what she says to me is like, look, you have this many K, you have that. And I'm like, I nod. I look like a stupid, like, I'm just like nodding, like, just like, this is great. I'm like, yeah, but are they getting it? are they feeling me? Are they really? And she's like, oh, she like rolls her eyes and just like walks away. She's a Capricorn.
Yeah.
She just looks at me and she's like, Jen, you made such and such and such. You really, as you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, people are really digging decolonizing therapy. Maybe remember when we only had like 120 followers and most of them were like your students. Like, remember when? And I'm just like, yeah, and that even came up in therapy, to be honest, today. Whoa, how interesting. Like, it came up that, like, I have a hard time accepting, like, taking in the compliments or the love.
Yep.
Like, people could say, thank you, or I appreciate this, or this makes me feel seen. And I feel it, but it's almost like I don't allow it in all the way. And that's a problem.
Yep.
You know, so I think that is also another function of coloniality. And that's another function of the ways in which we are taught to not be overly, like, not feel ourselves too much.
Yeah.
Right?
To be small and out of our power. I do the same thing. Anytime somebody says, thank you for I know what you're talking about. It's that, thank you so much for doing your work. Like, this really spoke to me. Like, you know, I love what you do. Like, all that stuff. You know, it does feel good. And also same thing. I don't think I'm taking it in all the way either. Like, not allowing myself to really take it in, because for fear of the ego, which is actually ego in of itself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
absolutely,
you identified it. Like we were talking about earlier, like, that's whose voice is that? That's the voice of the colonizer.
It is.
You know?
Yeah. It is the voice of the colonizer, and it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It is also, it makes me sad.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes me so deeply sad that sometimes I feel like not worthy of receiving what is being given to me. Like, it's right there in front of me, and I'm not allowing myself to receive. You know?
Yeah, well, that's a function of, or a byproduct of capitalism. Like, essentially, like, it's that ever dangling carrot in front of our, in front of our face, and it's that addiction to a destination that never truly arrives, and all of the things and all of the narratives are, like, everywhere we look, tell us that we're not enough, not enough. You wake up telling yourself you're not enough. You know, you go to bed telling yourself not enough. Even if you were thinking about all that you did today, you know, I don't know about you, but I will immediately at some point go to, oh, but I didn't get to do this. And I really wish I would have gotten to do that. And like, I really meant to do this today. Like, and it's like, when is it ever, when are we ever going to feel like I have done something of value and I can, like, feel it and it's being received, and, you know, like, this entire thing that you've set out to do and connect with other folks in the way that you've, you know, that you do, it's working, it's happening. And it makes me sad a little bit too, that knowing that you experience that and I experience that. I'm sure there's other Black and brown creators on the internet too that aren't allowing the joy that we all deserve.
Yes, because we do deserve it. And we're also so grateful that we can, like, connect with each other as well.
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely that, you know, voice of the colonizer on the inside, for sure. And it's also, like, my inner abuelita. Like, it's that self-sacrificial, like, no, like, being humble about this amazing pot of beans that I just made, that everybody's ranting or raving about. And then, you know, I can just see my great grandmother going, oh, I don't know, you know, I should have added more of this or whatever. And it's like, no, like, this is the best, you know, refried beans I've had in, like, a year, 2 years. Like, oh my God. But it's never enough. And it's just been reinforced and drilled into our DNA over generations that we are not enough. We will never be enough.
Yeah. And I find it so draining.
Yes.
And I also find it sad, you know, and I keep trying to recenter myself and bring myself and remind myself that it's okay and it's difficult to heal our relationships with ourselves, you know, when we're wishing parts of ourselves away. And then on some levels, the parts of ourselves that are not, you know, Caucasian enough.
Totally.
Right? We need to like invite them back into ourselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's
Yeah.
real.
One of the things that I had to do, I don't know if you get hate mail, but every once in a while, I actually get more nice, loving messages. Thank goodness, and
Yes,
thank you, anybody who's ever said a kind word to me. Thank you. I'm an incredibly sensitive person, and I get hate mail, and I get like terrifying things from you know, neo-Nazi, right-wing, white supremacist people on the internet all the time. And you know, I live with, you know, what they call complex PTSD. And so when that happens, it's extremely traumatic, and it always throws me off just about. But one of the things that I had to do was I've started like saving and compiling these messages, you know, in a drive on my phone, because I'm like, I need to be able, like, it is my cue when I get one of these, you know, hate-filled messages. Somebody's upset because, you know, I called out their privilege and now they think I'm being racist towards white people, whatever their bullshit is. And so they decided to say some really, really harmful things to me. It's a lot better to have this thing to like look at and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Like this isn't all for nothing. You know, I'm not not seeing what is happening, and also just stirring up more hate too. You know, so
That's
I don't
real.
I don't know if you've got love letters from folks, but I highly suggest anybody, you know, save those memos of kindness, those texts, those comments on your threads where somebody says, you know, like, this is really beautiful, I really needed to hear this, whatever it is. All of those things can help remedy those moments where we're just not in touch. I guess.
Thank you for that. I think I have to start saving all the loving messages as well. Yeah, definitely. I think I have to start doing that more often. And when I do get, you know, the hate mail or any kind of comments and what have you, sometimes it's like nonstop bullying, but it's usually around something specific.
Yeah.
You know? But if not, then it is like, oh, tell me. I often find people wanting like labor, like like something like big, like they want a lot from me, or, oh, you know, if you read such and such, what was your thought about such and such and such? It isn't done in a way, you know, some people do it in a way that is so amazing and loving, and you're like, yeah, you can have a conversation with them. With other people, I often feel, what is the word? Like they're trying to see if I really know what I'm talking about, quote unquote.
Yep. I think there is a word for that, and I'm not remembering it. And I'm sure some of my friends that I'm thinking of that are pretty savvy with social justice terminology are like, it's this word at home. But there's definitely a word for that, you know. It's just it's a form of like distracting or derailing.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
It's fucked up. It's from white supremacy. You're trying to knock somebody out of their power. You're trying to distract them. All of that stuff. Don't do that.
And I frequently just feel, or there are other people, to be honest, and like, no shade, but like there'll be other people on IG that are pretty well known, and they may start like asking me questions that have to do with race, you know, or like, oh, this person got mad at me. Do you think that this was wrong? Did I say something bad? Did I this? I don't want to bother you, but, and what I frequently realize is that we usually may not have already a connection, or like we haven't started chatting, you know? So you're kind of like asking me kind of out of nowhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like two, then you're, basically, or there's like this, what's the word? Like, oh, okay, but I didn't do anything wrong, right? But then you never really like show me love, shout me out,
Yeah.
a lot of that shadiness. So that tells me to just follow my intuition.
Hell yeah.
Follow my intuition and to back up when something is not working for me.
Yeah. Folks could really be a whole lot more conscious about the energetic consumption that takes place on Instagram.
Yes.
And this is, definitely directed at our white allies for sure. Like, check your privilege, like know that we have enough labor on our plates, and be very conscious of what you're asking us for. Yep. And if you're compensating us in some way, because you should be. And, my fellow, Black and brown brothers and sisters, etc., like do it too. And so one thing that we've established amongst me and my friends is just checking in first, because we experience so much trauma, racism, like whatever, all day long. You never know where somebody is at, how they're feeling, what they have the spoons for. Like it's as simple as consent. Like, hey sis, you got like space for this right now? Because I would really like to process this really racist thing that happened to me this morning, and I might be like, you know what, I had a really rough day, I can't. If you can't do it with somebody else, then I might be available for you tomorrow, but I absolutely cannot right now. That simple element is such a loving thing. And I think everybody could, especially like in relation to the professionals in your life, folks like you, folks like me, the consent of, do you have space for, and also ask me, is this something that, could or should be dealt with in an appointment?
Exactly.
Because it puts us in a weird space where it's like, you're asking a legit question. However, this is something you should probably be compensating me for.
Yeah.
And I don't want to seem rude or whatever it is, but like, I need to tell you, like, you should probably book an appointment. Like, that's a really personal, that's something that is like getting a reading,
Yeah. That's real. And I think that that's just ways that we can be a little bit more conscious all around and loving to one another.
Hell yeah.
And respectful of each other's spaces. And I know that everybody kind of sees the current stuff going around, like, check on your strong friend. But I think that there's some realness to that. And I frequently find myself telling people that in counseling and therapy, like, are you checking in with folks that are frequently the ones to hold it down in your community? Are you making sure that, this is going to sound a little harsh, but like sometimes what happens is that like depression can create a space where it's hard to see around you and how other people are feeling.
Yeah.
And I find, when I have some really loving, authentic conversations with my friends that tend to go more on that spectrum, I sometimes can be real about like, damn, sometimes I feel left out.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Sometimes, like I hear them thinking a lot about their needs, but where are my needs? And have I even thought about my needs? Or, am I happy just taking care of other people's needs because it makes me feel useful? And, it's just a lot of food for thought in how we can navigate and have more authentic relationships with folks instead of just being people pleasers. Because I think people pleasing is also a form of colonization.
Oh, hell yeah. It's a survival tactic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I'm like, folks at home, like, everybody knows somebody who's a caregiver or a healer or, in any sense of the word, whether they're a nurse, a therapist, a psychic, an astrologer, like whatever it is that they do. A mother, for heaven's sake, the folks that are using their energy to care for others, the organizers, the
Yes.
activists, like
Yes.
check on those, check on us, check on me, check on Jennifer. Like it's hella real, because I feel that way sometimes too. Like especially like when the climate's real bad and shit's really popping off in the news and it's like devastating, I will get like an influx of people, and I feel like people could check their, are you being very self-centered? And are you checking in with your privilege? Because your privilege will blind you, from my experience too. Like, are you asking me about something really trivial that's going to make me do a bunch of labor when I might be having a lot of depression because of something major that's happening in the news that's impacting me and my community, but it's not necessarily impacting you and yours?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just think that
it's very real.
I guess what we're asking for is like an intersectional perspective, like when you are coming to somebody about any type of exchange or with energy, like, can you do so consciously and intersectionally?
Yeah.
Because that's loving.
Yes, that is loving. It is loving, and it's grounding, and it's kind, and it's important. I'm just tired of giving so much of myself, so it's important for me to also be conscious of how I play a role in that. Like I have to take some responsibility for some of it too. So lately I've been stepping into that and paying attention a little bit more. How sometimes my need to be needed shows up. How my need to like make other people happy might show up, and where does that leave me? Like where's that at? Does that make
Yeah, I know exactly. I'm like, I have a Libra rising, so I know all about that.
I'm going to send you my chart. I'm going to send it right now. Pressing send.
Good.
This is fascinating. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just feeling so full with the conversation, and I'm just very appreciative.
Yeah, likewise. One more thing that I really want to make sure we get to while I had this awesome opportunity to chat with you, in terms of decolonizing therapy, or decolonizing in a therapeutic way.
Yes.
Do you have any calls to action for folks? Like if they are looking for like, how can I implement this into my life? Like how can I decolonize therapy or things like that? And if you could address specifically marginalized folks, and then if you want to, white allies, because their action items are different usually.
Absolutely.
So, what are some things folks can do?
This is a great point. This is a great question. What comes up for me in the process of decolonizing, this settler colonial mentality that, this place that we live in.
Yeah.
It's number one, really, really checking in on ourselves and taking care of ourselves in a way that I don't think that we have before, and allowing ourselves to begin to gently, and maybe with the support of somebody who does this full time, whether it's a healer, a therapist healer, like start to really unpack your pain.
Yeah.
We need to feel it to heal it, and that never gets old because it's real. That doesn't mean we need to feel it all at once. That doesn't mean, and I don't recommend that actually. I recommend, to be honest, that we start checking the negative self-talk. What do I say to myself most often? And very frequently I will find that the dialogue that I have internalized, or the people that I serve have internalized, has been that of oppressor language and energy. So I think it's really important not to just CBT it, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, look at your thoughts and shift them, and that's fine. But also look at, is that what you really want? Is that what you need? Where did your mom learn that from? Why have you been told that majority of your life? How could that be kinder to you?
Yeah.
How could you be kinder to you? So every morning, I ask myself, what do I need? So I would like our people, my people of color, to start fucking taking care of ourselves in a different way. You know, I'd really like us to start loving on ourselves a bit more, being a little bit more gentle, and to acknowledge that people's pain around us doesn't mean that they're weak. Because, you know, just because we're hyper super aware of therapy doesn't mean that we really have empathy and compassion for others.
Yeah.
You know? And that I feel like is a bit of a problem. So part of the decolonizing aspect, I think, is to like remember, you know, and remember the joy of building within your community and finding sanctuary for you and yours. And like, also, I would also recommend to begin to talk about therapy or queerness or fatness or any of that, or, you know, disabilities or struggles, mental health issues, even with some of our elders.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to minimize ourselves and what we know to be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is when it's safe. And I want to put that out there always, when it's safe, you know? So that's like one of the main things. And one of the other pieces are like, you don't have to like trauma everything. Like, oh, my trauma this, my trauma that, my trauma. Yeah, our trauma, it's old. It is deep. It, you know, like it goes fucking deep. And of course, we know it is not all of who we are.
Yeah.
You know, but it is good for us to look at how that plays a role in who we are and what our stories are, and check yourself to make sure that you're not like stuck in a storyline.
Yeah.
Because the storyline is not always true.
Yep.
And for, you know, white folks, one of the first things I would say, you know, with some mad love is like, sometimes you just gotta like shut the fuck up and listen. You know, sometimes you just gotta shut the fuck up and listen. And there's white people out there that I love deeply, you know, in my life. And that doesn't change the fact, but the whiteness comes up in our relationship, you know? And so if we don't talk about it, it will still come up, and then it will just turn me off in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
You know, so what I would tell white people is, instead of being worried about like how to fucking decolonize, start looking at how you oppress your fellow friend, Black friend, brown friend, you know, South Asian friend. Like, how do you fucking oppress your friends? And how do you make them feel less than, whether you're correcting their language all the time, or you're like looking at your watch when they're 20 minutes late because that's how we fucking roll and we're fucking tired, or, you know, whatever it is, like, just like slow down. Like, you don't have to try so fucking hard, and you don't have to make it always about you.
Yep.
That's what I would say.
Hell yeah. I co-sign the fuck out of that. Oh, I love that. That's pure gold. I'm like, write that down. It's so true. And like, one of the things that that I'm working on in some of the relationships with the white folks that I'm closest to in my life is having dialogue around, you know, like my husband saying, like, can you just let me know when I'm saying something that is oppressive or problematic? And my response is, when it feels safe, you know, because like, if we're like if we're around a bunch of white people, might not feel safe, you know, in certain settings and in certain, or even in like certain emotional spaces for me, you know. And so I think having those conversations are important, and coming to some type of like agreement of like, you know, like, I need you to know that it is not my job to do this labor for you in being, you know, my ally or the accomplice in my life. And it is also loving in our relationship for me to tell you when you've said something that's, you know, problematic or behaved in a way that was oppressive, etc. And, you know, like, whether it's creating some type of like safe word or you know, a space that you sit in with this person, you know, occasionally or regularly or whatever it is, to just kind of, let's unpack that for a little bit. Like, you know, has there been anything lately? Like that check-in is so loving, and could really, you know, could save a lot of relationships out there, you know?
Absolutely. And like you said, if we have the time, if we have the energy, if the person is important to us, right?
Because
if it's your partner, like, you're right, like, and, you know, if it's a colleague for me or someone that continues to just like run the same shit they always run after a while, I'm gonna pull back. You know, I'm not gonna be able to always provide them with what they fucking need. So, and I don't want to. You know, because I grew up in that environment. Like, I don't pass, you know, like as white, you know, I'm light. I'm really light, but I don't like pass. And my dad is like 6'9", 300 something pound, like giant, like he's massive fucking white dude. He's hella intimidating. And so I think that's part of my story and my storyline is that I have felt that oppression, even though he and I now have a good relationship, but like as a kid, I wasn't thinking, this is colonization. You know, I wasn't thinking that, but I definitely felt it. You know, I felt bad a lot. And I felt like I didn't meet a criteria a lot. And I was confused. And so part of me stepping into my power and loving and taking care of myself more is allowing myself that opportunity to be like, no, I just to get up. This doesn't feel good right now. You know, or I don't want to listen to this shit. Or you're saying some fat ass phobic, Eurocentric, cracker ass bullshit. I don't want to hear it. You know? Like, and then whether I say it out loud or in my head, you know, depends on how safe it is or not. You know, that's the reality for me.
Or saying it in your action. I can relate to this so much. Or in my actions, I'm like, if it's been a long time since I've come to visit you, that's probably why. You were probably saying some hella problematic shit. And I just, you know, am limiting your opportunities to cause me harm, you know? So I feel you.
So real.
Hella real. Oh, wow. So much good stuff. This has been amazing. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Likewise.
If folks at home want to connect with you, Jennifer, like they want to support your work, you know, work with you, lift you up, elevate you in every single way, what are some ways that they can find you, whether that's through social media, a website, or if perhaps that they're listening right now and they've really benefited from, you know, the words that you've said and would like to pay you in addition to what you're, you know, going to be paid for being here with me, to pay you for your labor. Like, you're welcome to share your Cash App, your Venmo, like whatever it is, because I'm all about that financial justice for us. You share that, you know, ways they can support.
Yeah, the first thing I would really love is for everyone to like take a breath and like take it. If you've lasted this long with us, take a deep breath and give yourself some love. Like, and we love you and we're sending hella love your way. And then I want to say, like, please sign up for like my newsletter. Like I have been pretty shitty at like sending stuff out because I have this like Virgo-ness in my life, in my brain. But, you know, if Instagram goes south, then please, that way at least you're still connected to me. And I will be putting out newsletters very soon, but please sign up. You can catch that on Instagram or what have you, or go onto my website. A new website is being created. For now, I have my old one up still, and that's at drjennifermullan.com. Mullan is Mullan, not En. You could also, if you really feel pulled to support and you want to drop some cash on my Cash App, you can. And that's $, Dr. Jenny Jen, JENNYJENN. Or you could Venmo me at Jennifer-Mullan or PayPal Jennifer Mullan 18. feel free. Find me on Instagram at decolonizing therapy. Feel free to find me on Facebook. I'm not doing a whole lot on there yet because, again, I'm trying to watch my time and energy. But feel free to also email me at Dr. DrJLMULLAN or you could just press the email me tab on Instagram. Those are the ways to best catch me. I will be in the LA area probably in like February. I'm going to be sending out a bunch of lists of different things I'll be doing in the fall. If you're interested in having me to come out to your school or your healing center, please feel free to email me, message me. I am going to be doing more moving around the country, around the world in the next year or so.
That's amazing. And I know I've asked you this before, but have you given any thought to creating like a Patreon?
Yes, and I need to like get on it. Yes, I just keep thinking like, how does it work?
Oh,
like,
girl. I'm like, I'm happy to answer any of your questions about that because I've been telling you for a minute, like, I want to support you on Patreon. Like, and I know that, there's thousands of folks that would also do the same. I'm like, let us lift you up and elevate you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that might be my next project, is to have a Patreon. Yeah, I think I am going to do that. It's just, when you have a list of things that you
I do know that never-ending list.
Yes, my Capricorn moon friend.
Yes, it's the cross one thing off and then add 3 more. I get it.
It's real. It's
awesome.
real.
Well, I hope everybody, jumps on Instagram, follows you, supports you in every way possible because you're amazing. Thank you so much for being here with me, Jennifer. This has been just magical and awesome. And to everybody listening at home, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to give us a good podcast review on iTunes and Google Play and all of the many other platforms you are listening to us on. If they do have a review section, please do, or comment, etc. And of course, share with your friends. And until next time, I send you so much love and power and revolution, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Revolutionary Mystic Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please consider supporting it on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/revolutionarymystic. All of our guests are paid as part of a movement to #actually support witches of color by creating financial equity. You can also check out the online Hoodoo Botanica, book psychic readings, take online classes, apply for the scholarship program for Witches of Color, join the free Facebook group, and watch witch tips on my YouTube channel by visiting revolutionarymystic.com.